The shuttle docked with a soft hiss, and Kang Do-hyun stepped out into the wide, bright corridor of Ilmara Academy. The air smelled clean, almost too clean, like someone had scrubbed every molecule of dust from it. Around him, dozens of alien species moved in all directions. Some walked on 2 legs, some on 4, some floated, and some slithered. None of them looked at him twice. He was just another student with a bag on his shoulder and a schedule in his hand. That was exactly how he wanted it. Do-hyun was 24 years old, average height, with short black hair and a calm face that gave away nothing. He wore a plain gray jacket and dark pants. He carried 1 bag. He looked like any other human transfer student arriving in the middle of the semester, a little late, a little lost, and completely unremarkable. He found his dormitory room on the lower level of the East residential block. It was small. A bed, a desk, a window that looked out at the stars. He set his bag down, sat on the edge of the bed, and let out a slow breath. The room was quiet. No alarms, no rumbling, no screaming, just silence and starlight. He could get used to this. The next morning, he reported to the xenobiology department for his first class. The professor was a tall, thin creature from a species Do-hyun did not recognize. It had 6 eyes arranged in a circle around its head, and spoke in a voice that sounded like wind blowing through a pipe. It assigned lab partners immediately. Do-hyun was paired with a Mareni named Haeun. The Mareni were small. Haeun stood barely up to Do-hyun's chest. Her skin was smooth and pale, almost translucent, and beneath it, soft light pulsed in slow, gentle waves. Blue, white, and sometimes a faint gold. Do-hyun had read about the Mareni before. They were one of the most physically fragile species in the Galactic Union. Their bones were hollow, their muscles were weak. A hard fall could break them. But they communicated through light, and their minds were brilliant. They were known across the galaxy as some of the finest scientists and researchers alive. Haeun looked up at Do-hyun with wide, round eyes. Her glow flickered nervously. "You are human?" she asked. Her voice was soft and careful, like she was afraid the words themselves might be too heavy. "Yes," Do-hyun said. He smiled gently. "I am Do-hyun. Nice to meet you." She blinked several times. The light under her skin shifted from nervous white to a cautious pale blue. "I have never been close to a Death Worlder before," she admitted. "I will try not to be scary," he said. She stared at him for a moment, then let out a tiny sound that might have been a laugh. Her glow warmed a little. Just a little. Over the next few days they fell into an easy rhythm. Haeun was incredibly smart. She understood biological systems in ways that made Do-hyun feel like he was still in elementary school. But the lab equipment was designed for species with more physical strength, and she struggled to lift the sample containers, adjust the heavy microscope arms, or open the sealed specimen cases. Do-hyun did all of that without being asked. He simply moved when he saw her struggling, lifted what needed lifting, opened what needed opening, and then stepped back and let her work. He never made a big deal out of it. He never pointed out her weakness. He just helped. By the end of the first week, Haeun's glow was warm gold whenever Do-hyun was nearby. He did not know much about Mareni light language yet, but he could tell that gold was a good color. Soha found him in the dining hall on his 7th day. Yoon Soha was his oldest friend. They had grown up in the same neighborhood in Busan, gone to the same schools, and when she had left Earth to study xenodiplomacy at Ilmara, she had been the one to convince him to apply. She sat down across from him and put her tray on the table with a sharp clack. "You look too relaxed," she said. "Is that bad?" "It means you have not heard about Torvan yet." Do-hyun chewed his food slowly. "Who is Torvan?" Soha leaned forward. "Break a noble's son. Big, mean, and connected. He runs a group of students on the lower levels. They bully weaker species, take their things, scare them into silence. Everyone knows, and nobody does anything, because his family donates a fortune to the academy. That sounds like a problem for station security. Station security answers to Commandant Rolus. Rolus answers to money, and Torvon's family has plenty of it. Dohyun looked at her. Soha, I came here to study, that is all. She held his gaze for a long moment. There was something in her eyes, something between worry and something older, a memory they both shared but never talked about. Finally she sighed and picked up her fork. Fine, just be careful, and keep your head down. That is the plan. He meant it. He really truly meant it. He had spent the last 2 years putting himself back together piece by piece, like rebuilding a house after a fire. He had gone to therapy. He had learned to sleep without waking up swinging. He had taught his hands to stop shaking when he heard loud noises. He had earned his place at this academy through exam scores and essays, not through the things he had done before. He was not a soldier anymore. He was a student. That was the whole point. That night, after Soha left and the corridors grew quiet, Dohyun sat alone in his small room. The stars turned slowly outside his window. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small metal box, dented and scratched. He opened it. Inside were a pair of dog tags on a chain. The metal was warped and blackened along one edge, burned by something very hot a long time ago. The name stamped into them was his own, Kang Dohyun. Below that, his service number. Below that, the words, Earth Orbital Defense Corps. He held them in his palm. They were light, just small pieces of metal, but they carried the weight of 6 years and 3 worlds, and things he could not talk about in daylight. He put them back in the box. He closed the lid. He locked the box and pushed it under his bed. His hands were shaking, not from fear, never from fear, from memory, from the ghosts that lived in his muscles and his bones, and the dark space behind his eyes, from the sound of screaming that no amount of silence could fully erase. He pressed his palms flat against his knees and breathed. In, hold, out. The way the therapist had taught him. The shaking stopped. Slowly, like a storm passing. Dohyun turned off the light and lay down. The stars moved outside his window, cold and endless and beautifully quiet. He closed his eyes. Tomorrow he would go to class. He would help Haeun with the lab equipment. He would eat lunch with Soha. He would be a student, nothing more. That was the plan. And for a little while, it almost worked. 3 weeks passed, and Dohyun fell into a routine that felt almost normal. He woke up early, went to class, spent afternoons in the xenobiology lab with Haeun, ate dinner with Soha, and studied in his room until the station lights dimmed for the night cycle. It was simple. It was peaceful. It was everything he had wanted when he left Earth. Haeun was the best part. She was shy and quiet around everyone else, but in the lab, she came alive. Her glow would shift through colors as she talked about cellular structures and genetic adaptation. Blue for excitement, gold for satisfaction, bright white when she made a discovery. Dohyun did not understand half of what she said, but he liked listening. Her voice was soft and steady, and her light was warm, and it made the lab feel like the safest room on the station. She started teaching him Mireni light language. A slow pulse of blue meant, I am comfortable. A flicker of white meant, I am thinking. A dim, cool gray meant, I am afraid. She showed him by holding out her hand and letting the light change under her skin while she explained each meaning. Your species uses sound and face to communicate emotion, she said one afternoon. We use light. It is harder to hide what we feel. That sounds difficult, Dohyun said. It is, she agreed, especially when you are afraid and everyone can see it. He looked at her carefully. Are you afraid of something, Haeun? Her glow dimmed slightly. She turned back to her microscope. "No," she said. "I am fine." She was not fine. Do-hyun started noticing things, small things. Haeun arriving at the lab with her research files missing. Haeun flinching when certain students walked past. Haeun sitting in the far corner of the dining hall, alone, with her glow so dim she was almost invisible. Once, he saw a bruise on her arm, a dark spot under her translucent skin where the light could not reach. He did not push her. He waited. He kept showing up, kept helping, kept being steady and calm beside her. It took another week before she told him. It was Torvan. Torvan and his group had been targeting the Mareni students for months. The Mareni were the easiest prey on the station. Physically weak, unable to fight back, and too afraid to report anything because Torvan had made it clear what would happen if they did. They stole research materials, blocked access to labs, cornered Mareni students in empty corridors and mocked them. They called them glowbugs and glass bones, and other names that Haeun repeated in a voice so flat and dim that Do-hyun felt something twist inside his chest. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. "Because you are kind," she said, "and he is not. And I did not want you to get hurt because of me." Do-hyun looked at her for a long time. Her glow was gray, the color of fear. He had learned enough light language by now to know that gray was the worst color a Mareni could show. It meant they had been afraid for so long that the fear had become part of them. "I will handle this," he said. The next morning, he went to Commandant Rollis's office. The Commandant was a tall, broad creature with dark red skin and a permanent expression of boredom. His office was large and decorated with expensive things. Do-hyun sat in the chair across from his desk and explained the situation clearly and calmly. He gave names, dates, and descriptions of what had been done to the Mareni students. Rollis listened without interrupting. When Do-hyun finished, the Commandant folded his thick hands together and said, "I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. However, I believe this is simply a cultural misunderstanding. The Breka are a physically expressive species. What you see as aggression, they see as play." "They broke her research equipment," Do-hyun said. "They bruised her arm. The Mareni bruise easily. It is their nature." Rollis smiled in a way that was not really a smile. "I will make a note of your concern. You may go." Do-hyun left the office without another word. He found Soha in the library and told her what had happened. She slammed her hand on the table so hard that 3 alien students nearby jumped. "I have been collecting evidence against Rollis for 2 months, she said through her teeth. "He is bought and paid for. Torvan's family funds half the Academy's new construction projects. Rollis will never act against him. Then we go to the Union Oversight Board. I am not ready yet. I need access to his private communications. I need proof of the financial connection." She looked at him. "Give me more time." "But I am going to talk to Torvan." "Do-hyun, don't. I am just going to talk." He found Torvan in the main dining hall that evening. The Breka was impossible to miss. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, with thick gray skin, a wide jaw, and arms like tree trunks. He sat at the center of a long table, surrounded by 5 or 6 members of his group, all of them large species, all of them laughing loudly. Do-hyun walked up to the table. The laughter stopped. Every eye turned to look at the small human standing in front of the biggest predator in the room. "Torvan," Do-hyun said. His voice was calm and polite. "I am Kang Do-hyun. I am Haeun's lab partner. I am asking you to leave her alone. Leave all the Mareni students alone." Torvan stared at him. Then he started laughing. It was a deep, ugly sound. His group joined in. "A human," Torvan said. "A Deathworld animal comes to my table and gives me orders." He towered over Do-hyun by more than a foot. He reached out, grabbed Do-hyun by the front of his jacket, and lifted him off the ground with one hand. Do-hyun did not struggle. He did not grab Torvan's wrist. He did not kick. He hung in the air like a coat on a hook and looked Torvald directly in the eyes. The dining hall had gone completely silent. Hundreds of students watched. "I am asking you nicely," Dohyun said. His voice had not changed. It was still calm, still quiet, still polite. But there was something underneath it now, something that did not match the rest of him. It was the kind of quiet that comes right before a very loud sound. "I will not ask again." Torvald held him there for a moment longer. Then he snorted, dropped Dohyun back to the floor, and turned away. "Go back to your glow bug," he said, "before I step on you both." His group laughed again. Dohyun straightened his jacket and walked away without looking back. Every alien in the room thought the same thing. The human had been foolish. The human had been weak. The human had lost. Across the hall, Soha stood frozen near the food line. She was not looking at Torvald. She was looking at Dohyun's face as he walked toward the exit. She had known him since they were children. She had seen every version of him. The boy who cried over stray cats. The teenager who laughed too loud. The young man who came back from his third deployment and did not laugh at all for 6 months. She recognized the look on his face now. She had seen it only once before, years ago, on the day before he shipped out for the last time. That flat, still expression, that absolute calm. It was not the face of someone who had given up. It was the face of someone who had just started counting. Soha set down her food tray. She was no longer hungry. Torvald did not stop. He got worse. The dining hall incident had embarrassed him. A human, a creature from a backwater death world, had walked up to his table and spoken to him like an equal, in front of everyone. That could not go unanswered. But Torvald was not stupid. He understood power, and he understood how to use it. He did not come after Dohyun directly. That would give the human importance. Instead, he went after the thing the human cared about. He went after Haeun. It started small. Her lab locker was broken into, and her samples were destroyed. Her access card to the research wing stopped working. She found a message scratched into her dormitory door in crude break-a-script. It said, "Glass bones break easy." She reported none of it. Her glow stayed gray. Dohyun noticed. He always noticed. He asked her what was happening, and she told him it was nothing. He did not believe her, but he did not push. He walked her to and from the lab every day instead. He sat with her in the dining hall. He made himself visible beside her, hoping that his presence would be enough. It was not enough. On a quiet evening during the station's night cycle, Haeun left her dormitory to retrieve a data tablet she had forgotten in the lab. The corridors were mostly empty. The lights were dimmed to simulate nighttime. She walked quickly, her glow held low, trying to be invisible. She did not see them until it was too late. 4 of Torvald's group stepped out of a maintenance corridor and surrounded her. They were big, all of them, heavy species built for worlds with thick atmospheres and rough terrain. Haeun looked up at them, and her glow went completely white with terror. They did not say much. They did not need to. One of them grabbed her research tablet and crushed it in his hand. Another pushed her against the wall. She hit the metal hard. For a human, it would have been a rough shove. For a Moreni, it was devastating. She felt something crack in her left arm, a thin, hollow bone snapping under the impact. She cried out. The sound was barely a whisper. Moreni voices were not built for screaming. Then the largest of the 4 reached out and pressed his thumb against one of the light nodes on her shoulder. These nodes were the organs that produced a Moreni's bioluminescence. They were sensitive, complex, and deeply connected to the Moreni nervous system. He pressed hard and twisted. The node cracked. Haeun's glow went dark on that entire side of her body. The pain was blinding. It was like having a nerve ripped from her skin. She collapsed to the floor, curling into a ball, her remaining light flickering in broken, desperate patterns that meant nothing except agony. One of them leaned close and said, "Tell your human friend that Torvald sends his regards." Then they left her there, in the dark, in the cold, alone. Do-hyun found her 20 minutes later. He had gone to check on her when she did not respond to his messages. He searched the lab first, then the corridors near her dormitory, and then he started checking every hallway on the lower level, moving faster and faster, his heart beating harder with each empty corridor. He found her in the maintenance hallway. She was curled on the floor, barely glowing. One side of her body was completely dark. She was shaking so hard he could hear her hollow bones rattling against the metal floor. He knelt beside her. "Haeun," he said. His voice was steady. "I am here. You are safe now." She looked up at him. Her eyes were wet with something that was not quite tears. Instead, the light that should have been in her skin leaked from her eyes in faint, shimmering drops, like liquid starlight falling down her face. "They broke my node," she whispered. "I cannot glow on my left side. I cannot speak properly. Half my words are gone." For a Mareni, losing a light node was like losing the ability to speak. It was like someone cutting out half your tongue. It was not just physical pain. It was the theft of language, of identity, of self. Do-hyun picked her up. She weighed almost nothing. Her body was so light in his arms that he could barely feel her. He carried her through the corridors, to the medical bay, walking fast but not running, because running might shake her broken bones. The medical staff took her immediately. Do-hyun stood outside the treatment room and watched through the glass as they worked on her. He watched them stabilize her arm. He watched them scan the cracked light node and shake their heads. The damage was severe. It might heal in time. It might not. He stood there for a long time. He did not move. He did not speak. His face was perfectly still, like a lake with no wind, and underneath the surface, something was happening that no one could see. Inside Kang Do-hyun there was a door. He had built it carefully over 2 years of therapy, 2 years of slow, painful work. The door sat between who he was now and who he had been before. On this side of the door was the student, the lab partner, the quiet young man who helped with heavy equipment and learned light language and smiled at small things. On the other side of the door was everything else. The 6 years, the 3 worlds, the things he had done in the dark, on planets where the air was poison and the ground wanted to swallow you, and every living thing was either trying to kill you or already dead. He had learned to keep that door shut. He had learned to breathe through the shaking, to sleep through the nightmares, to walk through a crowded hallway without scanning for threats. He had built a new life on this side of the door, and it was good, and it was fragile, and it was the most important thing he had ever done. But now he stood outside the medical bay and watched the faint, broken flicker of Haeun's remaining glow through the glass, and the door inside him opened. He did not fight it this time. He let it open. He let it all come back. The training, the instincts, the cold, clear way of seeing the world that had kept him alive on 3 death worlds where nothing should survive. It settled over him like old armor, familiar and heavy and terrible. The student disappeared. The soldier came back. He stayed until Haeun was stable. She was sleeping when he finally turned away from the glass. Her glow was barely there, a faint, thin pulse of light that looked like a candle about to go out. But she was alive. She would survive. He walked out of the medical bay. Soha was waiting in the corridor. She had gotten his message. She had come running. Now she stood in his path, breathing hard, and looked at his face, and every word she had planned to say died in her throat. She had seen this face before, not often, only once really, on the worst day she could remember. "Do-hyun," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Don't." He looked at her. His eyes were calm. Perfectly, terribly calm. There was no anger in them. Anger was loud and hot and messy. This was something else. This was the quiet that came after the anger burned away and left nothing but clarity. "They had every chance," he said. He gently took her hand off his arm. He walked past her down the corridor. He moved like something that had spent years learning how to cross ground without making a sound. Soha pressed her back against the wall and closed her eyes. In his dormitory, Do-hyun knelt beside his bed and pulled out the metal box. He opened it. The dog tags sat on top, burned and scarred. He did not touch them. He reached beneath them and pulled out what lay underneath. A pair of tactical gloves, worn and faded. Earth military issue. The knuckles were reinforced. The grip pads were still good. They had been through 3 worlds with him. He pulled them on. They still fit perfectly. He flexed his fingers once, twice, and then stood up and walked out of his room. The corridor was dark. The station was deep in its night cycle. Most students were asleep. That was fine. Do-hyun did not run. He did not rush. He moved through the station the way water moves through cracks. Quiet, steady, and impossible to stop. The first thing he did was disappear. Ilmara Academy was a massive orbital station, and like all stations, it had 2 faces. The public face was bright corridors, open plazas, and clean classrooms. The hidden face was a web of maintenance tunnels, service shafts, and utility corridors that ran behind every wall and beneath every floor. Most students did not know these tunnels existed. Do-hyun had mapped them in his first week. It was not something he had planned to do. It was just instinct. On the Death Worlds, the first thing you did in any new environment was learn the exits, the blind spots, and the places where you could move without being seen. Old habits. He entered the maintenance network through a service hatch near the engineering wing. The tunnels were narrow, dark, and warm with the hum of machinery. He moved through them in silence. His feet made no sound. His breathing was slow and controlled. He was not sneaking. He was operating. There was a difference. Sneaking was what amateurs did. Operating was what happened when every movement had a purpose and every second was accounted for. His first stop was the security monitoring station on the lower level. 2 cameras covered Torvan's territory. Do-hyun opened a junction panel, identified the correct cables, and disconnected them. The feeds would show static. By the time anyone noticed and sent a technician, he would be done. Then he went hunting. Torvan had 4 lieutenants, 4 large, strong aliens who did his dirty work, who cornered the weak and broke things that did not belong to them. Do-hyun knew their names, their species, their schedules, and where they slept. He had been watching for 3 weeks. Not because he had planned this, because watching was another old habit. You always tracked the threats in your environment. Always. He found the first one in a storage room near the lower dining hall. A heavy, thick-skinned creature sitting alone, eating something from a sealed container. Do-hyun stepped in and closed the door behind him. The creature looked up, confused. It took him a moment to recognize the human. "You are the Glowbug's friend," he said, and started to stand. He did not finish standing. Do-hyun moved. There was no warning, no winding up, no dramatic pause. 1 second he was standing by the door. The next second the alien was on the floor, gasping, with his arm locked behind his back at an angle that promised terrible things if he moved. Do-hyun had crossed the distance in 2 steps. He had used the alien's own weight against him, redirecting his rising momentum into a throw that slammed him chest first into the ground. Humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the fastest, but they were from Earth, a world where the gravity was heavy, the predators were smart, and everything alive had spent millions of years learning to fight, run, or die. Human muscles were dense. Human bones were solid. Human reflexes were fast enough to catch a falling object before the brain even registered it had dropped. And human endurance was the thing that terrified the galaxy most, because a human could keep going long after any other species had collapsed. Do-hyun leaned close. "You touched my friend," he said. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. "You will not do it again. Nod if you understand." The alien nodded frantically. Do-hyun released him and left. The whole encounter had taken less than 30 seconds. The second lieutenant was in a corridor near the gymnasium. This one saw Do-hyun coming and swung at him. It did not matter. Do-hyun stepped inside the swing, trapped the arm, and drove his elbow into the nerve cluster under the alien's jaw. The alien went down like a puppet with its strings cut. Do-hyun lowered him to the floor carefully. He did not want to cause permanent damage. He wanted to cause understanding. The third was sleeping in his quarters. Do-hyun woke him by sitting on the edge of his bed. The alien opened his eyes, saw the human sitting in the dark, and let out a sound that was halfway between a scream and a whimper. Do-hyun put one finger to his lips. "Quiet," he said. "I just want to talk." He talked. The alien listened. When Do-hyun left, the alien did not go back to sleep. He sat in his bed with the lights on until morning. The fourth was the one who had cracked Hae-yoon's light node. The one who had pressed his thumb into her shoulder and twisted until something beautiful broke. Do-hyun found him in the maintenance tunnels, heading back to his dormitory through a shortcut. The alien rounded a corner and found the human standing in the middle of the narrow corridor, arms at his sides, gloves on, perfectly still. "Hello," Do-hyun said. The alien charged. He was big and fast and angry, and in any normal situation, he would have crushed a human flat. Do-hyun sidestepped. The alien crashed into the wall. Before he could recover, Do-hyun was on him. 3 precise strikes, each one targeting a joint, a pressure point, a vulnerable spot that Do-hyun knew from years of studying alien anatomy and combat training. The alien went down hard. He tried to get up. Do-hyun put him down again, and one more time until the alien finally stayed on the floor, groaning, curled around his injured limbs. Do-hyun crouched beside him. "She could not scream," he said softly. "Did you know that? The Mereni cannot scream. Their voices are too small. So when you broke her node, when you took half her light away, she suffered in silence. And you walked away." The alien stared up at him. His eyes were wide, not just with pain, with something deeper, with the primal ancient recognition of what it felt like to be prey. "You will remember this," Do-hyun said. "Every time you think about hurting someone weaker than you, you will remember that something from a death world came for you in the dark, and you will stop." He stood and walked away. Next, he went to see Soha. She was awake, sitting in the library with her datapad, exactly where he knew she would be. She looked at him. She did not ask what he had done. She could see it in the way he moved, the way his shoulders were set, the way his eyes had that flat, faraway look. "I need the access codes to Rolus's private terminal," he said. She stared at him for 3 long seconds. Then she handed him the datapad. "I have been building this case for months, Do-hyun. If we send it to the Union Oversight Board, Rolus is finished. Financial records, communications with Torvan's family, orders to suppress student complaints. It is all there." Do-hyun took the pad. "Thank you. Be careful." "I am always careful." 20 minutes later, the evidence was uploaded and transmitted through an encrypted channel to the Galactic Union Oversight Board. It would arrive on their desks by morning. And then there was Torvan. Do-hyun found him in his private quarters. The door was locked. It took Do-hyun 11 seconds to bypass the lock. He had cracked harder security on planets where getting through a door wrong meant getting eaten. Torvan was awake. He was sitting on his bed, a communication device in his hand, his face twisted with confusion. He had just received panicked messages from all 4 of his lieutenants. The door opened. Do-hyun walked in. Torvon stood up. He was enormous. He reached for the weapon he kept beside his bed, a heavy metal baton that could break bones with a single swing. What happened next lasted 8 seconds. Torvon swung the baton. Do-hyun was not there. Torvon swung again. Do-hyun was behind him. There was a crack as Do-hyun struck the inside of Torvon's knee. The giant buckled. The baton came down again. Do-hyun caught his wrist, twisted, and the weapon clattered to the floor. 2 more strikes, fast and exact, and Torvon was on his knees, then on his face, with Do-hyun's boot resting lightly on the back of his neck. The room was quiet. Do-hyun leaned down. "On my world," he said, "we protect the people who cannot protect themselves. That is not a choice. That is what we are. I asked you nicely. You should have listened." Torvon did not move. When station security finally arrived, responding to the triggered alarms from the door bypass, they found Torvon on the floor of his quarters, his lieutenants scattered across the lower level, nursing their injuries, and 2 security cameras offline. They found a data transmission logged to the Union Oversight Board. And they found Do-hyun sitting on the floor outside the medical bay, right where Haeun was sleeping, his tactical gloves folded neatly in his lap. He looked up at the security officers. His face was calm. His hands were steady. "I would like to file a formal complaint," he said. The academy did not sleep the next morning. By the time the station lights brightened for the day cycle, the news had spread through every corridor, every dining hall, every dormitory block. The story grew with each telling. A human, a single human, had dismantled Torvon's entire operation in one night. He had taken down 4 of the most feared students on the station without a weapon. He had put the biggest bully in the academy on the floor in 8 seconds, and he had done it all without raising his voice. Some students were afraid. Most were not. Most were quietly, secretly relieved. The Union Oversight Board responded within hours. A team of investigators arrived on a fast transport ship that docked at the academy before lunch. They went straight to Commandant Rollis's office. They brought armed security with them. The evidence Soha had collected was thorough, detailed, and devastating. Financial transfers from Torvon's family to Rollis's personal accounts, orders to suppress student complaints, records of discipline reports that were filed and then deleted, communications that proved Rollis had known about the abuse and had chosen to protect the abuser. Rollis was removed from his position that afternoon. He was escorted off the station in restraints, his face blank with shock, as if he could not believe that the system he had built to protect himself had been torn apart in a single night by a transfer student and a diplomacy major. Torvon and his group were expelled. The 4 lieutenants faced assault charges for the attack on Haeun. Torvon himself faced additional charges for conspiracy and intimidation. His family's lawyers arrived the next day, but the evidence was too clean, and the Oversight Board was not interested in negotiations. And then there was Do-hyun. He faced a disciplinary hearing 3 days after the incident. The Academy Council convened in the main assembly chamber, a wide, circular room with seats rising in tiers around a central floor. Do-hyun stood in the center. He wore his plain gray jacket. His hands were at his sides. He looked the same as he always did, quiet, calm, unremarkable. Except now, everyone in the room knew what unremarkable could mean. The charges were straightforward. He had assaulted 4 students. He had broken into a 5th student's private quarters. He had disabled security equipment. He had bypassed a locked door. Each of these was a violation of Academy rules, and together they were serious enough to warrant immediate expulsion. Soha stood beside him as his representative. She had spent the last 3 days preparing for this moment, gathering evidence, organizing testimony, and memorizing every relevant regulation in the Academy's code of conduct. She was nervous, but she did not show it. She had learned that from Do-hyun. Show nothing until it is time to show everything. She addressed the council. Kang Do-hyun reported the harassment of Mareni students through proper channels, she said. He went to Commandant Rolis. He was dismissed. He confronted Torvon directly and asked him in front of hundreds of witnesses to stop. He was mocked and physically grabbed. He used every peaceful option available to him, every single one, and they all failed. Not because he did not try, but because the systems that were supposed to protect students like Haeun were broken. She paused and let that sink in. He did not act out of anger. He did not cause permanent injury to anyone. He used the minimum force necessary to stop a threat that the Academy itself refused to address. And in doing so, he uncovered corruption that this council should have found on its own. The council members shifted uncomfortably. Then Soha did something that made Do-hyun close his eyes. She put his military record on the display. It was heavily redacted, most of the details hidden behind black bars. But what remained was enough. 6 years of service in Earth's Orbital Defense Corps, 3 deployments to contested death worlds, 2 commendations for valor, both awarded for actions taken to protect Allied alien forces under fire. A medical discharge listed as cumulative psychological trauma. The room was very quiet. He did not come to this academy to fight, Soha said. He came here to stop fighting. He came here to learn, to heal, and to become something other than what Earth's wars made him. And he was doing it. He was succeeding. Until someone hurt the person he was trying to protect, and every system that should have stopped it chose to look the other way. She turned to the council. You can expel him. That is within your authority. But I want you to understand what you would be expelling. Not a violent man. A man who used violence as a last resort, and who will carry the weight of that choice for the rest of his life, because that is the kind of person he is. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then there was a sound at the entrance. The doors opened, and Haeun walked in. She was still recovering. Her left arm was in a medical brace. The left side of her body was still dark, where the cracked light node had not yet healed. She moved slowly, carefully, and every step looked like it cost her something. But she moved with purpose. Her remaining glow was steady, a pale, warm gold that did not flicker. I wish to speak, she said. The council allowed it. Haeun walked to the center of the floor and stood beside Do-hyun. She was so small next to him. She barely reached his chest. She looked up at the council, and when she spoke, her soft voice carried clearly through the silent chamber. I have been at this academy for 2 years. In that time, I have been pushed, mocked, threatened, and broken. My research has been stolen. My body has been hurt. And until Do-hyun arrived, not one person on this station treated me as someone worth protecting. Her glow pulsed, steady and warm. He did not help me because I am weak. He helped me because he saw me as a person, not as a glowbug, not as glass bones, as a person. He carried me to the medical bay when I could not walk. He sat outside my door until I was stable. And when the systems that were supposed to keep me safe failed, he did not fail. She looked at Do-hyun. He was staring straight ahead, his jaw tight, his eyes bright. I am not here to defend what he did, Haeun said, turning back to the council. I'm here to tell you that he is the only reason I am still at this academy. And if you send him away, you are telling every student here that the people who hurt others will be punished, but the people who stop them will be punished too. And I do not think that is the lesson you want to teach. She finished. She did not step back. She stood right where she was, beside Do-hyun, her one good side glowing gold. The council deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the head of the council, an ancient, slow-moving creature with deep blue skin and tired eyes, read the decision. Kang Do-hyun was placed on academic probation for the remainder of the semester. He was required to complete a conflict resolution course. He was barred from the lower residential levels for 30 days. He was not expelled. He was allowed to remain. The decision sent a quiet ripple through the academy. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a shift, like a current changing direction. Students who had been afraid began reporting things they had been silent about for months. Other bullies, smaller ones who had operated in Torvin's shadow, suddenly found that their victims were no longer afraid to speak. Slowly, but they changed. 3 weeks later, Do-hyun and Hae-yoon were back in the xenobiology lab. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The light through the lab windows was soft and white. Hae-yoon was examining a cellular sample under the microscope, her right side glowing with focused blue light. Her left side was still dim, but not dark. There was light there now, faint and unsteady, like a candle trying to stay lit in a breeze. The doctor said the node was healing. It would take time, but it was healing. Do-hyun sat beside her, reading a datapad, handing her tools when she needed them, same as always. Do-hyun, she said without looking up from the microscope. Yes? Are you okay? But the way she asked it, with her glow shifting to that specific shade of warm gold, that meant she was asking with her whole self, not just with words, made it hard to answer quickly. I do not know, he said. She looked up from the microscope. Her round eyes studied his face. I opened a door, he said slowly. A door I spent a very long time learning to close, and now I am not sure I can close it again. The things I did that night, I did them too easily. It felt too natural, and that scares me more than Torvon ever could. Hae-yoon was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out with her right hand, her good hand, the one that still glowed warm and gold, and she placed it over his. Her skin was cool and smooth. The light beneath it pulsed slowly against his rough, heavy, death-world skin. It was the gentlest thing he had felt in a very long time. Her glow shifted. A new pattern. One she had never shown him before. It was slow, deep, and steady. A rhythm like a heartbeat. Warm gold, fading to soft white and back again. He did not know this phrase in light language, but he felt what it meant. You are not alone. Do-hyun looked at her. His eyes were bright, his throat was tight. He did not trust himself to speak. He turned his hand over and let her small, glowing fingers rest in his palm. He held them carefully, the way you hold something precious and impossibly light, something that a death-world hand could so easily break, but never, never would. For the first time since arriving at the academy, he smiled. Not a polite smile, not a careful smile, a real one, small and tired, and full of something that might have been hope. Outside the lab window, the stars turned slowly in the endless dark. The station hummed, and in a small room, full of microscopes and specimen jars, a soldier from a death world and a girl made of light sat side by side, and the distance between their worlds did not matter at all. Across the galaxy, species feared what Earth had made. They saw the dense bones, the thick muscles, the restless eyes that were always scanning for danger. They saw predators. But they misunderstood the lesson. Earth did not just make killers. It made people who would walk through fire for a stranger, and then sit quietly beside them while the burns healed.